The desert had a cruel beauty that day. The air shimmered like glass, and the red cliffs of Arizona stood jagged against a sky so pale it seemed to fade into nothing. Ethan Cole rode through that emptiness with the steady rhythm of a man used to silence. His horse, a weary bay with a torn ear, moved cautiously over the loose stones. The saddle creaked, the canteen clinked, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. Ethan hadn't planned to ride this far west. He'd left the army 2 years ago, carrying only a pistol, a scar across his ribs, and too many memories of blood. He'd hoped the desert would quiet them, but the desert wasn't kind. It whispered, it tested, and it watched. That morning he was looking for water. By sunset he'd find something far more dangerous. The canyon narrowed ahead, forcing him to slow down. The trail twisted between walls of rust-colored rock, streaked black from ancient rain. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the desert. A scream. Sharp, terrified, human. Ethan froze, the sound echoing off the stone. He couldn't tell where it came from at first. The wind seemed to mock him, carrying the noise away. Then it came again, a woman's voice, desperate and broken. Without hesitation, he dug his heels into the horse's flanks. The animal snorted and charged forward. The canyon walls closed in tighter, and suddenly the path opened into a sunlit hollow. What he saw there made his blood turn cold. At the far end of the clearing, 3 raiders, dust-covered men with bows and knives, had cornered a woman against the rocks. Her wrists were bound, her dark hair tangled, her face streaked with dust. She looked Apache, proud even in fear. One man had a rope ready. Another raised a bow. Ethan didn't think. He moved. "Hey," he shouted, drawing their attention. The raiders spun, startled. The one with the bow loosed his arrow, and Ethan kicked his horse straight into its path. The arrow struck his shoulder like a hammer blow. Pain exploded through him, but he didn't stop. He charged through the clearing, revolver drawn. The second raider swung his knife, but Ethan's bullet found his chest first. The third turned to run, and Ethan fired again, missed, and then the last arrow flew, slicing across his ribs. He stumbled but stayed upright, forcing himself between the woman and the attackers. The raiders fled into the rocks, their shouts fading into the wind. For a long moment, all Ethan could hear was the rasp of his own breathing. His horse stood trembling beside him, sides heaving. Blood ran hot down his arm, soaking his sleeve. The Apache woman stared at him, her wide eyes fixed on the arrows in his flesh. "Easy," he muttered through clenched teeth, lowering his weapon. He turned toward her, half expecting her to run. Instead, she took a hesitant step forward. She spoke something in Apache, words he didn't understand, but her voice trembled with disbelief. She reached out, her fingers hovering near his shoulder, then stopped, afraid to touch. Ethan knelt to cut the rope from her wrists. "You're free now," he said quietly. "They're gone." The knife blade slipped from his fingers, clattering against the stone. His vision swam. The heat and pain made the world tilt. The woman caught his arm, steadying him. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Sit," she said, her English rough but firm. "You bleed too much." He tried to argue, but she pushed him down gently onto a flat rock. She tore a strip from her own dress and pressed it against the wound in his shoulder. Ethan hissed but didn't pull away. Her hands were steady, her eyes focused. "Why?" she asked after a moment, not looking up. Ethan blinked at her through the haze of pain. "Why what?" "Why you stop arrow?" she said. He gave a faint, tired smile. Didn't think about it. Just seemed wrong to watch. Her gaze lifted then, studying him as if trying to see through his words. The canyon wind swept between them, carrying dust and the faint smell of blood. Finally, she nodded. "My name Tyen," she said quietly. "You hurt bad, Ethan," he managed. "And yeah, I've been worse." Tyen tore another strip of cloth and tied it around his ribs. The sun was sinking fast now, painting the canyon walls gold and crimson. Somewhere far above, a hawk circled. Ethan tried to stand but stumbled again. Tyen caught him, her arm under his, guiding him toward a shadowed passage at the base of the cliffs. "You come," she said softly. "My people, help." He wanted to refuse, to tell her he didn't belong with her people or anyone, but her voice left no room for argument. And as the desert swallowed the last of the light, Ethan followed the Apache woman into the canyon's hidden heart, his blood on the sand, and his fate forever changed. The world drifted in and out of focus. When Ethan Cole opened his eyes again, everything was red. The cliffs, the firelight, even the inside of his skull. His body felt heavy as if the desert itself had buried him halfway in sand. The last thing he remembered was the woman's voice, soft and commanding, telling him to move to stay awake. Then darkness had swallowed him whole. Now faint light flickered across his face. He wasn't outside anymore. The air smelled of sage and smoke, and somewhere nearby water dripped steadily, echoing off stone walls. He tried to move, but pain bit deep into his shoulder and side. He groaned aloud, a shadow shifted beside him. Then her voice, quiet, low, unmistakable. "You live." Ethan turned his head slowly. Tyann knelt beside him, her hair falling loose around her face. She wore a deerskin dress now, clean and mended, and her hands were busy grinding herbs in a small clay bowl. Behind her, a small fire crackled inside a hollow cave lit by torches. He blinked. "Where?" "My home," she said. "Hidden place. No one find." She dipped her fingers into the bowl and pressed a cool paste against his wound. He flinched but didn't pull away. The mixture stung like fire before easing into a dull, spreading warmth. "You pulled the arrows out?" he asked. Tyann nodded without looking up. "Yes, 2 deep, you lucky." "They miss heart." He gave a faint laugh that turned into a cough. "Lucky's not the word I'd use." Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile. Then her expression turned serious again. "You fight strong. Foolish, but strong." Ethan leaned his head back, the rock cool against his skull. "Couldn't let them take you." Her eyes lifted at that. "You not know me." "Didn't need to," he said quietly. "They were going to hurt you. That's enough." For a long moment she studied him in silence. The firelight made her eyes glow like polished amber. She seemed to weigh his words, testing whether they carried truth or pity. Then she set the bowl aside and stood. "You rest," she said. "I go bring water." When she disappeared through the narrow opening of the cave, Ethan exhaled slowly. The pain in his shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, but worse than that was the strange ache in his chest, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something he didn't want to name. He'd seen too much cruelty in his years as a soldier, too many faces of men who believed they were righteous while burning everything they feared. He'd left that behind, or so he'd thought. But seeing those men corner Tyann had ripped open something inside him, a wound deeper than any arrow. After some time, she returned carrying a clay jug. She knelt again, offering him a drink. The water was cool and clean. He drank greedily, the taste of dust leaving his throat. "You from Army," she said, not as a question but a quiet fact. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Was, not anymore. Her expression hardened slightly. "Army kill many of my people." "I know," he said. The guilt in his tone was raw. "That's why I left." She looked at him for a long time, her jaw tight. Then she said softly, "You leave because of shame?" He met her gaze. "Because of truth. Because I couldn't follow orders that didn't have honor." For the first time, she seemed to believe him. She reached for the cloth at his side, peeling it back to check his bandages. The wound was still bleeding a little. She pressed new herbs into it, murmuring words in Apache he couldn't understand. "What are you saying?" he asked. "Calling spirit of healing," she replied. "Old words. My mother teach me." Her voice was steady, almost melodic, and he found himself listening more to the rhythm than the meaning. When she finished, she tied the bandage again and sat back, her face tired but calm. "You sleep now," she said softly. "Tomorrow maybe you walk." Ethan managed a faint smile. "You're not afraid I'll run?" Tyann tilted her head. "You cannot run," she said simply with a hint of teasing. "You fall after 5 steps." That made him laugh weakly, and for the first time since the ambush, the cave felt less like a place of pain and more like shelter. Outside, the desert wind moaned through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of mesquite and the low hum of night insects. Tyann stirred the fire, her face lit by orange light. Ethan watched her quietly, realizing something he hadn't before. He had saved her life, yes, but now she was saving his. When sleep finally claimed him, he dreamed of arrows turning to feathers, of hands binding not in pain but in healing, and of a woman's voice whispering through the firelight, "You live. You belong." The morning broke with the sound of distant drums and wind sighing through the canyon walls. Ethan Cole stirred awake to the faint scent of smoke and pine. His wounds still burned, but the fever that had tormented him through the night had finally loosened its grip. For the first time since the ambush, he could think clearly, and what he saw around him left him speechless. The cave was not just a hiding place. Beyond its narrow entrance stretched a hidden valley, green and alive, shielded from the desert by cliffs and tall pines. Below, a cluster of Apache lodges, made from hide, wood, and brush, stood in perfect order beside a stream. Smoke rose from small fires and figures moved about. Women grinding corn, children chasing each other, men sharpening blades. Tien was standing outside, speaking to an older man whose hair was streaked white but whose eyes still held the sharpness of a hawk. She glanced back when she noticed Ethan watching. The man followed her gaze, frowning. Ethan knew that look. It was the same one he'd seen on every frontier patrol that had ever faced him. Suspicion. He tried to rise, but pain lanced through his shoulder. Tien turned quickly, moving to his side. "You stay," she said firmly. "You not ready." "Where are we?" he asked, his voice rough. "My village," she replied. "Hidden. Safe. No white man come here." He nodded slowly, realizing the weight of what she'd done. She had brought him, the man who looked like her people's enemy, into her secret home. That alone could have condemned her. The older man entered the cave, ducking under the low roof. His face was lined by years of sun and grief. Tien spoke in Apache, her tone calm but urgent. Ethan caught only a few words, his own name, the word for soldier, and something that sounded like Ashki, meaning man. The old man studied him in silence for a long moment before speaking. His voice was low, full of authority. "He says," Tien translated softly, "you are not welcome." Ethan nodded. "I understand. He says you bring trouble. Maybe soldiers follow you. Maybe raiders return." "Tell him," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't come to bring trouble. I came because I heard someone scream." Tien relayed his words. The old man's gaze never left Ethan's face. Then he said something short and sharp. Tien hesitated before translating. He says, "Brave heart, foolish head." Despite the tension, Ethan gave a weak laugh. "That sounds about right." The man left without another word. Tien exhaled as if she had been holding her breath the whole time. "He is Nantan, my uncle." "Chief now," she said. "He think I make mistake." "Maybe you did," Ethan said softly. "Bringing me here could get you in trouble." Tien's eyes met his, fierce and unwavering. "You save my life. I save yours. That not mistake." He couldn't argue with that. Still, he knew her people would not see it that way. The Apache had fought too long and lost too much to trust a man in boots and a revolver. By midday, word of his presence had spread. As Tien led him slowly through the camp to sit by the stream, every eye followed them. Children peeked from behind baskets. Warriors watched from shadows, hands resting near their weapons. Ethan kept his head down, not wanting to give reason for fear. Tien guided him to a flat rock near the water. "Sit," she said. "You need sun." He obeyed, watching as she knelt beside him to wash his bandages. "You don't have to do this," he said. She gave a small shrug. "If I not help, you die." "If you die, my spirit not rest." He frowned. "Your spirit?" "Yes," she said simply. "When one saves another, they are bound. If one suffers, both suffer. My mother teach me." The way she said it, quiet, certain, made something shift in him. He wasn't sure he believed in spirits, but he believed in debt, and he owed her more than he could repay. Later, an elderly woman brought food, roasted rabbit, corn cakes, and herbs. Tien ate beside him, explaining the ways of her people, the names of the mountains, the meaning of the hawk's cry. Her English was broken but clear enough to paint pictures in his mind. For the first time in years, Ethan felt still. No orders, no gunfire, just wind, water, and her voice. Yet he could feel the tension humming beneath it all. The tribe didn't trust him, and sooner or later the distrust would turn to action. That night, when Tien guided him back to the cave, he paused at the entrance. "If your chief tells me to go," he said quietly, "I'll go." Tyann looked at him, the torchlight flickering in her dark eyes. "He may tell," she said. "But maybe I not listen." Then she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ethan with the uneasy realization that the place he least belonged was slowly starting to feel like home. The days passed in a rhythm Ethan Cole hadn't known since boyhood. Dawn came cool and blue through the canyon, the air sharp with pine and wood smoke. By mid-morning the sun burned hot, and the sound of children's laughter mixed with the thud of stone on grain as women ground corn. Life in Tyann's village pulsed with quiet order, each person belonging, each task sacred. Except for him, Ethan could feel the distance in every glance. The Apache warriors kept to themselves, though their eyes never strayed far from him. When he limped through the camp, conversations fell silent. Even the children stopped playing until he passed. He couldn't blame them. To them, he was not a savior. He was a reminder of bluecoats, burning homes, and the sound of rifles. Only Tyann treated him differently. Every morning she came to his tent, little more than a hide stretched between two poles, and checked his wounds. Her hands were careful, her silence steady. Sometimes she would hum softly an old melody that drifted between them like smoke. Ethan never asked what the song meant. He didn't want to break whatever fragile peace it brought. Still, even her kindness was watched. He could feel the eyes of her uncle, Chief Nantan, on them from across the fire, and in those eyes he saw both doubt and warning. One afternoon, as Tyann changed his bandage, Ethan finally said what had been weighing on him. "You shouldn't keep helping me," he murmured. "Your people don't want me here. I can walk now. I'll leave in the morning." Tyann didn't look up. She tied the cloth tight, her jaw set. "You leave, you die," she said simply. "Desert take you." He gave a half smile. "Then maybe that's what's meant to happen." Her eyes lifted sharply. "You think death is answer for everything?" "I've seen worse things than death," he said. She stared at him for a long time. "Maybe, but not everything you lose is gone." Ethan didn't know what to say. Her words struck something deep in him, a truth he'd avoided. Before he could answer, she rose and walked out, leaving him with the fading scent of sage and firewood. That night, sleep wouldn't come. He lay staring at the canvas above him, listening to the distant beat of a drum. The song was slow and mournful, rising and falling with the wind. He wondered if it was for him, or for someone the tribe had lost long ago. At dawn, he woke to the sound of footsteps outside. When he stepped into the cold morning air, he found two young warriors waiting, each armed with a bow. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes, spoke in Apache, his tone hard. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but the message was clear. "Stay away from Tyann." Ethan didn't argue. He nodded and stepped aside. But as they walked off, he caught the glare one of them threw over his shoulder, a glare filled with something more than hate. Jealousy, maybe. Later, Tyann came to find him sitting by the stream. "They say things," she said softly, kneeling beside him, "about you, about me." "I can guess," he said. "They think I'm trouble." "They think I forget who I am," she replied, staring into the water. "That I bring danger close." He turned to her. "They're not wrong. Wherever I go, trouble follows." Tyann looked at him then, her expression unreadable. "You think I afraid?" Ethan almost smiled. "No. I think you're the only one here who isn't." A small silence settled between them, broken only by the rush of the stream. She dipped her hand in the water and let it run through her fingers. "When you came," she said quietly, "I see blood and pain, but I also see spirit that not broken. My people believe scars speak truth. Yours tell of pain, but also heart." He met her eyes. "And what do yours say?" Tyann hesitated, then said, "Mine say I still learning to forgive." That confession hung in the air, fragile and raw. The next few days, Ethan kept his distance. He helped gather firewood, repaired tools, and spoke only when spoken to. But every time he caught Tyann's eyes across the campfire, something passed between them, a recognition neither of them could name. Then one evening the peace shattered. A scout arrived from the ridge, breathless and shouting. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he saw the fear ripple through the camp. Warriors leapt to their feet, women hurried the children indoors. Tyann turned pale. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Her answer came like a gust of wind through the flames. "Raiders," she whispered. "They come again." And as the drums began to beat faster, echoing through the valley, Ethan knew whatever distance had grown between them would soon be erased by blood. The night before the raid, the Apache camp was cloaked in uneasy silence. Fires burned low, and warriors whispered near the edge of the valley, sharpening blades and checking their bows. Even the horses seemed to sense what was coming, stamping nervously in the corral. Ethan sat apart from them, close enough to see the glow of the flames flicker across their faces, but far enough to remind himself he wasn't one of them. His shoulder still ached from the arrow wound, though the pain was dull now, buried beneath the weight of something deeper, the knowledge that he was about to fight again. He'd promised himself never to raise a gun for another man's war, but this wasn't a war born of pride or conquest. This was survival. Tyann's people had taken him in when they should have left him for dead. If the raiders came, he couldn't sit by and watch. He was lost in thought when Tyann appeared beside him, carrying a bowl of stew. The light from the fire danced over her features, calm but tense, her dark eyes reflecting worry and resolve. She handed him the bowl without a word and sat beside him. "They will come with first light," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "How many?" "More than before," she murmured. "Maybe 20, maybe more." He stirred the stew, appetite gone. "Your chief has a plan?" She nodded. "We hide the children in the caves. The warriors wait in the rocks above the trail. When raiders enter, we strike from both sides." He took a breath. "Then I'll be up there with them." Tyann turned sharply. "No, you are not ready." Ethan met her gaze. "I wasn't ready the first time either, but that didn't stop me." She looked at him for a long moment, then lowered her eyes. "If you fight," she said softly, "you fight as one of us. Not as soldier. As man who defends his home." The word home struck something deep in Ethan. He had wandered for so long he'd forgotten what that word even felt like. As the fire popped and hissed, Tyann reached for a stick and began drawing in the dirt. "My father died here," she said, tracing the outline of the valley. "Raiders came when I was little. They wanted horses, food. My father stand in front of them. He'd die before I see him fall. My mother take me to mountain. She tell me, when the heart remembers pain, the spirit must find reason to forgive." Ethan watched her face. "Did you?" She gave a faint, sad smile. "Not yet." For a while they sat in silence. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the sound of the drums, the deep, steady rhythm of men preparing to face death. Ethan broke the silence. "I wasn't much older than you when I joined the army. Thought I was doing the right thing. Thought it was about honor." He paused, staring into the fire. But out there, honor meant burning villages, hunting men who just wanted to live free. "When I saw the truth, it was too late. The things I did," he swallowed hard. "There are days I wish I hadn't lived long enough to remember them." Tyann's hand stilled in the dirt. "That is why you jumped in front of Arrow," she said. "You think maybe dying make things right?" Ethan didn't deny it. Maybe it did. She turned toward him, eyes fierce in the firelight. "No, dying changed nothing. Living, and choosing different path, that changed everything." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and honest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something like hope flicker inside him, a small, fragile flame. He looked at her then, really looked. The strength in her jaw, the scars on her hands, the unflinching courage in her eyes. She wasn't a woman to be pitied. She was a survivor forged by fire and loss, and he realized that whatever tomorrow brought, he didn't want to face it anywhere but by her side. A sudden gust of wind scattered the embers, painting sparks across the dark. Tyann rose, brushing the dust from her hands. "Tomorrow you fight beside us," she said. "But tonight you rest. The spirits walk before battle. They listen to the hearts of the living." Ethan nodded slowly. "And what will yours say?" She gave a small, knowing smile. It will say, "Don't die again for me." Then she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving him staring into the flames, her words echoing through him. He touched the scar beneath his shirt, the wound that had nearly killed him, and understood, for the first time, that every scar had a reason. Some came from pain, others came from love. And as the drums beat on through the night, Ethan Cole closed his eyes and prayed, not for victory, but for the chance to keep living long enough to earn the life he'd been given twice. The dawn came blood red over the canyon. A streak of sunlight split the horizon, lighting the cliffs like they were burning from within. The air was dry and still, too still. Not even the birds called. Ethan Cole stood beside Tyann on a narrow ledge overlooking the valley. Below them, the Apache warriors moved with silent precision, taking their places among the rocks and trees. Their faces were painted in streaks of black and red, the colors of war and protection. The women and children had already been sent deep into the caves beyond the ridge. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and checked the revolver at his hip. His shoulder still ached, but the wound had closed enough for him to move. Tyann had insisted on binding it herself that morning, her fingers trembling slightly as she tied the last knot. She hadn't said much, but her silence spoke louder than fear. It was the quiet of someone who had already accepted whatever came next. From their position, Ethan could see the dusty trail that wound into the valley. The raiders would come that way, they always did. Men like them were predictable. They thought the Apache were broken, desperate. They never expected the desert to fight back. Tyann crouched beside him, her bow ready. "They come soon," she said softly. Ethan nodded, scanning the horizon. "How many do you think?" "Maybe 20, she whispered. "Maybe more. But they not know we wait." He looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. "You shouldn't be up here," she smirked faintly. "You think I hide while my people bleed?" He didn't argue. He knew better. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun climbed higher and the heat shimmered over the sand. Then faintly they heard it, the rhythmic thud of hooves. Dust began to rise on the horizon. Shapes appeared through the haze. Men on horseback, armed with rifles and bows, riding fast. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Here they come," Chief Nantan signaled from across the rocks. The warriors melted into position, bows drawn, waiting. The raiders rode straight into the valley, unaware of the eyes watching from the cliffs above. Ethan counted 10, 15, 20. His pulse hammered. He waited until they were close enough to see their faces. The same kind of men who had burned villages and killed families on both sides of the border. Then Nantan raised his hand and the air exploded with sound. Arrows rained down from both ridges, striking the raiders before they could even draw their guns. 2 horses screamed and fell. Shouts filled the canyon as the attackers tried to scatter. Ethan fired his rifle, the kick slamming into his shoulder. One raider fell from his saddle. Another ducked behind a rock and returned fire. The battle descended into chaos, the canyon filled with dust and gunfire. Ethan moved from rock to rock, firing and reloading, his body acting on instinct. He saw Tyann loosing arrows with deadly precision beside him, her face calm and fierce. Then a shout rang out from the left. A small group of raiders had broken through, heading straight for the caves where the women and children hid. "Tyann," Ethan shouted, pointing. She saw them too. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the ridge. "Wait," Ethan called, but she didn't stop. Cursing, he followed. His legs burned as he climbed after her, gun in hand. By the time he reached the ridge, Tyann was already in the open, firing arrows down at the oncoming raiders. She hit one, then another, but the third man leveled his rifle at her. Ethan didn't think. He threw himself between them. The shot went off. Pain tore through his side like lightning. He stumbled but stayed upright, raising his revolver and firing back. The raider dropped instantly. Tyann turned, her face stricken. "No," she cried, catching him as he fell to one knee. "Keep fighting," he grunted. "They're almost gone." The last few raiders, seeing their leader fall, turned their horses and fled, disappearing into the desert as quickly as they had come. The echoes of battle faded, replaced by the crackle of fire and the ragged sound of breathing. Tyann knelt beside him, pressing her hands to his wound. Blood soaked her palms, hot and thick. "You fool," she whispered, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. "Why you do this again?" Ethan's vision blurred, but he managed a faint, pained smile. "Because I told you once. I don't watch people die if I can stop it." She pressed harder, her voice trembling. You not die. You hear me? You not die here. He wanted to answer, but darkness was closing in fast. The last thing he saw was her face, fierce and desperate, before the world slipped away into blackness. Far below, the warriors shouted victory. The tribe had survived. But Tyann didn't hear them. She was too busy holding the man who had bled for her people twice, his life hanging by a thread, his scars growing by one more story. The desert was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. Smoke curled from the burned edges of the valley, carrying the scent of gunpowder and blood. The battle was over, but its echo clung to the wind like a ghost. Tyann sat beside Ethan's still body, her hands slick with his blood. Around her, the warriors moved through the canyon, gathering weapons, tending to the wounded, and murmuring words of mourning for the fallen. But Tyann heard none of it. Her heart pounded too loudly in her ears, drowning everything out except the shallow breaths coming from the man who had once been a stranger, and was now something far more. Chief Nantan approached quietly, his weathered face grave. He still lives? Tyann nodded weakly. Barely. The old chief knelt beside Ethan, studying the wound. The bullet passed clean, but he has lost much blood. If he lives through the night, the spirits favor him. Tyann's jaw tightened. Then the spirits will favor him. They must. Without waiting for a reply, she tore strips from her own clothing and bound the wound again. Her hands didn't shake this time. She had already decided. He wasn't going to die here, not after everything. When the sun fell and shadows crept into the canyon, Tyann and 2 other women carried Ethan to a nearby cave. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of sage. They laid him on a bed of furs, and Tyann lit a small fire. She cleaned his wound with a mixture of herbs and water, whispering words she'd learned from her grandmother. Prayers to the earth, to the wind, to the spirits that walked unseen through the night. At one point, his body trembled and his breath hitched sharply. His hand, rough and scarred, reached weakly for hers. Tyann. His voice was little more than a whisper. She leaned close. I'm here, you rest. You safe now. He blinked slowly, struggling to keep his eyes open. Did we win? She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Yes, you save us again. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a pained groan. Then every scar was worth it. Tyann's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead to his. No more scars, Ethan, no more. He drifted back into unconsciousness, and Tyann sat there for hours, refusing to move. Outside, the tribe held a quiet ceremony. Fires burned along the ridge, and warriors chanted low songs for those who had fallen. Chief Nantan lifted his staff to the stars and spoke of sacrifice, of the white man who had come as an enemy but fought as a brother. When he finished, he turned to the people and said, From this night, Ethan Cole is not an outsider. His blood has joined ours in battle. His spirit walks beside the Apache. The word spread through the camp like fire. For many it was a sign. Perhaps the world was changing even in this harsh land. Days passed. Ethan's fever rose and fell like the tide. Tyann hardly slept. She crushed herbs, changed his bandages, and murmured to him when he stirred in his dreams. Sometimes he spoke her name, sometimes her brother's. Once he murmured something she didn't understand. Home. But when he finally woke, truly woke, it was night again. The fire flickered low, and Tyann sat beside him, half asleep, her head resting on her arm. He turned his head toward her and whispered, You should have left me. Her eyes snapped open. She stared at him, then smiled through tears. You think I leave the fool who jump in front of bullets for me? You wrong, he chuckled weakly. You always this stubborn? Only when the spirits send me someone worth fighting for. He looked at her then, really looked, and realized that she wasn't the frightened woman he had met by chance. She had become something stronger, sharper, and somehow that strength had kept him alive. Outside, thunder rumbled far to the south, rolling over the desert. The long drought had broken at last. Rain began to fall in soft, steady drops, washing over the scorched canyon. The sound was like a heartbeat returning to the land. Tyann stepped out to feel it on her skin, then turned back to him. The desert forgives tonight, she said softly. Ethan smiled, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Then maybe it forgives me too. She knelt beside him again, touching his cheek. You have nothing to be forgiven for, Ethan Cole. You saved my people. You saved me. The rain grew stronger, drumming against the rocks, drowning the silence that had haunted them for so long. And for the first time since the war began, Tyann allowed herself to believe in something like hope. Because even in the blood and fire of the desert, something new had survived, something born not from hatred, but from sacrifice. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It fell steady and relentless, soaking the canyon, turning the dry riverbeds into rushing streams. The land drank deeply, the way a dying man takes water after crossing a desert. Inside the cave, Ethan lay awake, watching drops of water slide down the stone walls. Each sound, each soft patter felt like the heartbeat of the earth itself. His body still ached, but the fever had broken. He was alive. Barely, but alive. Tyann sat near the fire, grinding roots into paste. The light flickered across her face, softening her sharp features. When she noticed him stirring, she smiled faintly. "You wake. Good." He tried to sit up, groaning. "You've been taking care of me again." "Yes," she said simply. "You bad patient?" He laughed weakly. "Always have been." She walked over and sat beside him, pressing the cool paste onto his wound. "You heal fast." "Strong man." He winced as she touched him, then gave a crooked grin. "Or just too stubborn to die?" Tyann chuckled under her breath. "Maybe both." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy with the kind of understanding that only comes when two people have already seen each other's worst. Outside, the wind whistled through the narrow canyon, but inside the cave the air was warm, safe. Ethan studied her face, the calm in her eyes, the quiet strength in her movements. "Tyann," he said softly, "what happens now? The raiders are gone, but what about you? Your people?" She paused, setting down the bowl. "We rebuild. We always rebuild. Desert takes much, but she gives too. We make new homes. Plant again." She glanced toward the cave entrance where the rain shimmered like silver curtains. "And you?" He hesitated. "I don't know. I was headed west before all this. Thought maybe I'd find a place where a man like me could start over. But after everything, maybe I already did." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "You think this is your place?" "I think," he said slowly, "it's the first place that's ever felt like it could be." For a moment, the only sound was the rain. Then she stood, her hair loose over her shoulders, and stepped outside into the storm. Ethan watched as she tilted her face to the sky, letting the rain wash over her. "Tyann," he called softly, "you'll catch cold." She turned to him, smiling. "Rain not curse, it blessing." He pushed himself to his feet, leaning on the cave wall for balance, and limped out after her. The air was cool and clean. The scent of wet sage filled his lungs. The desert stretched out before them, alive again. Tyann looked up at the clouds, her arms spread slightly as if to embrace the storm. When rain comes after fire, land is reborn. Same with heart. "You understand?" Ethan nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah," he murmured. "I think I do." For a long moment, they stood together, the rain running down their faces, washing away the dust, the pain, the blood. The world felt new again, quiet, alive, full of something neither of them dared name yet. When they returned to the cave, she handed him a blanket and sat near the fire again. "Tomorrow," she said, "Chief Nantan hold council. He speak of you. He say maybe you stay, become one of us." Ethan's eyes widened. "You think your people would accept that? A white man among the Apache?" She looked at him steadily. "Some already do. You fight for them, bleed for them. You save children, women. You not outsider now. You, brother, maybe more." Her last words hung in the air, unspoken but clear. He swallowed hard, his heart thudding. "And what do you think, Tyann?" She didn't answer right away. She stirred the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise and fade. "I think," she said finally, her voice low, "the spirits bring people together for a reason. Maybe they bring you here, for me." Ethan's breath caught. He reached for her hand, rough fingers brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. Outside, the storm began to fade. The rain softened to a drizzle, and the first stars appeared through the thinning clouds. Tyann turned to him, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "new sunrise. Maybe new life too." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll be here to see it, with you." The fire crackled between them, and in its glow, the distance that once separated two worlds, white and Apache, stranger and warrior, melted away like mist. For the first time in his wandering life, Ethan Cole felt like he belonged. And though the desert outside was still scarred by battle, The storm had done what it always promised. It had washed the earth clean, and with it, 2 wounded hearts. Morning came soft and golden, spilling light over the canyon walls. The storm had passed, and the air smelled of wet earth and cedar. Tiny streams trickled down from the cliffs, feeding the thirsty roots of the mesquite trees. Ethan stepped out of the cave, breathing deeply. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't sting his lungs. His side still throbbed under the bandages, but he could walk without help now. Below him, the Apache camp stirred to life. Smoke rising from fires, voices murmuring, children laughing faintly. Life had returned to the valley. Tyen joined him, her long black hair braided loosely. "Chief Nantan waits for you," she said quietly. Ethan adjusted his belt and nodded. "Guess it's time to face him." They walked together down the rocky path toward the camp. People stopped what they were doing as he passed, some with wary eyes, others with quiet respect. A few of the warriors nodded to him. It was more welcome than he'd expected. Chief Nantan stood near the central fire, his presence commanding even in stillness. His face was lined like the canyon walls, carved by wind, time, and wisdom. Beside him stood 2 elders and a younger warrior with a bow slung across his back. When Ethan approached, Nantan gestured for him to sit. Tyen took a place beside her uncle, her gaze fixed on the flames. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled, smoke twisting into the morning light. Then Nantan said, "Ethan Cole, you have fought for our people. You have shed blood with us. You have risked your life twice for one who is not of your tribe." Ethan bowed his head slightly. "I did what anyone should have done." The chief's eyes glimmered with quiet amusement. "No, many men talk of honor. Few act." He lifted a small pouch from the ground and held it out. Inside were beads of turquoise and bone, strung together with leather. "This," Nantan continued, "is the mark of the Eagle clan. We give it to those who stand between death and the people. If you wear it, you are brother to us." Ethan hesitated, overwhelmed. "Chief, I don't know what to say." Nantan stepped forward and placed the necklace around his neck himself. "You say nothing. You live with honor. You carry our name." The tribe murmured approval. Tyen's lips curved into a smile that glowed warmer than the firelight. Then Nantan raised his staff and spoke louder, his voice rolling through the canyon. "From this day, Ethan Cole is no longer a wanderer. He is Nantan So, the White Hawk, protector of our people. His courage belongs to the wind, his scars to the land." The words echoed against the cliffs. Children laughed and a few women began to sing softly, their voices weaving through the air like the song of the river. Ethan stood there, stunned. For a man who'd spent half his life being chased off someone else's land, this was more than an honor. It was belonging. When the ceremony ended, Tyen approached him, eyes shining. "White Hawk," she said, testing the name on her tongue. He grinned. "Sounds strange." "Then you get used to it," she teased. He looked around at the tribe, at the people who had once viewed him with suspicion and now called him brother. "Your uncle didn't have to do this." "He see truth," she said simply. "He knows spirit when it's strong." "You prove heart." They walked together toward the riverbed where the water still ran from the rain. Ethan knelt to touch it, letting the coolness run over his fingers. "Never thought I'd end up here," he murmured. "I spent years fighting to survive. But this," he glanced at her, "this feels like the first time I'm really living." Tyen crouched beside him. "Maybe this where you belong." He turned to her, studying her face in the light. "Maybe it is. But what about you, Tyen? You've lost family, fought battles. What do you want now?" Her gaze softened. "I want peace. To plant again. To see my people smile. Maybe," her voice dropped, "maybe to not walk alone anymore." He swallowed, his heart thudding. "You don't have to." A silence stretched between them, filled with meaning neither dared break. The sun caught her face just then, and he thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful, wild, strong, and unbroken. From the distance, drums began to sound, steady, rhythmic. The tribe was preparing a feast to mark the victory and the coming of rain. Tyen stood and extended her hand. "Come. Tonight we eat, dance, and thank the spirits. You are part of us now, White Hawk." He took her hand, standing slowly. "Then lead the way." As they walked back toward the camp, the sound of laughter and drums grew louder. Smoke curled into the twilight, carrying the scent of roasting meat and cedar. The valley, once a place of blood and sorrow, now pulsed with life again. Ethan looked up at the crimson sky, then at the woman beside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't searching for somewhere to go. He had found it, right here, between the fire and the rain, between the scars of his past and the promise of her eyes. The feast began as the sun sank behind the red cliffs. The sky burned with shades of gold and crimson, fading slowly into violet as the first stars appeared. Fires blazed in a wide circle at the heart of the Apache camp, throwing sparks high into the air. The sound of drums filled the night, deep, powerful, alive. Ethan, now wearing the turquoise and bone necklace of the Eagle clan, sat among the warriors. Children ran past laughing, women sang, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and wild herbs. For the first time since he could remember, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Tyann sat across from him, dressed in a white doeskin dress stitched with red thread. Her dark hair shimmered in the firelight, and every time she smiled, he forgot the ache in his ribs. Chief Nantan raised his staff, and silence fell over the camp. "Tonight," he said, his voice strong and steady, "we honor the spirits who gave us rain. We honor the brave who stood between us and death. And we honor the man who came from far away and now walks among us as brother Nantanso, the White Hawk." The people cheered. Ethan stood awkwardly, not used to being the center of anything but trouble. He gave a short nod, his throat tight. "I don't deserve this," he said. "But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to." Nantan smiled. "The spirits do not choose wrong." As the drums resumed, Tyann crossed the firelight toward him. She stopped only a few steps away, the glow of the flames dancing in her eyes. "You speak like Apache now," she teased softly. He smiled. "Guess it's rubbing off." The music grew faster and pairs began to dance around the fire, circling, turning, their shadows flickering across the sand. Tyann held out her hand. "Come, White Hawk." Ethan hesitated, then took her hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip firm. She led him into the circle, her laughter rising with the rhythm of the drums. They moved together clumsily at first, his boots stumbling, her steps light as feathers, but soon the rhythm caught him, and he matched her pace. Around them the tribe cheered. The drums grew louder, the chants rising with the wind. The fire crackled, throwing golden light across their faces. When the song ended, Tyann stood close to him, breathing softly. "You dance not bad," she said with a playful smile. He laughed quietly. "Maybe I just had the right partner." They stood there for a long moment, the noise around them fading. Her eyes lifted to his, full of things she hadn't said. "Ethan," she whispered. "What you do now?" He looked into the flames. "If you'll have me here, I'll stay. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, as one of you." Her breath caught and her lips curved into a slow, tender smile. "And if I say I want more than that?" He turned toward her fully. "Then I'd tell you I stopped running the day I met you." Her gaze softened. She reached up, tracing a line along the scar on his cheek, the one left by an arrow that should have killed him. "Every mark tells stories," she said. "This one says you saved me." He caught her hand gently. "Every scar I got. It's worth it if it brought me here. They didn't need more words." The fire flickered between them, and when he leaned down, she met him halfway. Their lips brushed, soft, careful at first, then certain. Around them the people laughed, sang, danced. But in that moment the world felt very still. When they finally pulled apart, Tyann rested her forehead against his chest. "You belong now," she whispered. "To this land, and to me." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. The drums slowed, their rhythm blending with the steady beat of his heart. The desert wind swept through the camp, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. Chief Nantan watched from his place near the fire, smiling faintly. "The spirits were wise," he murmured to the elder beside him. "The White Hawk has found his nest." As the night deepened, the stars spread across the sky like scattered embers. The fires burned low and laughter softened into quiet conversation. Ethan and Tyann sat side by side watching the horizon. "Tomorrow," she said, "we begin planting again. The land live once more," he nodded. "Then I'll be there by your side." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good," she whispered, "because I think the desert already chose you." And as the dawn crept closer, painting the cliffs with light, Ethan Cole, the wanderer, the soldier, the man with too many scars, finally understood what it meant to have a home. Not one built of wood or stone, but of hearts that had learned to heal together. The desert wind whispered his new name, Nantan So, and carried it far across the plains, where it would live in stories long after the fire had gone cold. The end.